Everything happened so quickly, I couldn't believe what she said she did. Honestly, I knew I was in big trouble when I saw them leaving the cruise ship arm in arm, but hearing it from her was unbearable. Maybe I should have kicked her out right then, but she was my life. I lived for her, and I loved her so much. When she calmly said that she did not regret her affair, it was like a knife in the heart. If she had repented and never seen them again, perhaps things would have been different. Initially, it was my love for her that made me forgive her for cheating. I never wanted to lose her. Never. She was everything to me. When Millie said she wanted to go away with them, I knew what it meant, despite what she said. She released anger that I had never felt before, and now that love is a thing of the past. Well, maybe not. I still loved her so much that it hurt, but not as much as the pain she caused me when she asked if she could go away with them again. She said all the wrong things to save our marriage, and it was obvious she didn't know me well after all our years together if she thought I'd be happy with what was going on. The situation only got worse when I listened to the recordings of her phone conversations with Donna and learned that this had all been planned on the ship. Donna told Millie that I would be willing to accept her affair and that I would never do anything other than beg her to stay because we had been married for 40 years. She added that I would be too scared to lose her. Maybe she was right after all, except that she knew nothing about the demons they unleashed when they cuckolded me and my need for revenge for what they did. I remembered my favorite character in William Shakespeare's play who was deceived, and I swore then that this would never happen to me. I thought he was a good role model. As soon as we walked through the door after returning from the ship, I began my plan in case my life went awry. And this happened when she told me everything that I didn't want to hear, but then it only got worse, much worse. How could she do this to me? I thought about what I would need to do on the way home, but I still had a lot of details to work out if I thought our marriage was over. I already had close-up photos of them on deck and going down the ramp, and then goodbyes as they went their separate ways. I took these photos with my trusty Nikon digital camera with a decent telephoto lens of them exchanging kisses and hugging, so I knew the quality and clarity of the photos would be good. But most importantly, I had clear photos of his cruise ID with his name on it. It turned out to be a good move. Millie refused to give me his full name, saying, "Ben, please trust me. His name is not important because I will never see him again." These words still ring in my ears. She must have been a little worried that I might try to find him if I found out. Oh well, I did it, and he ended up paying. I also took some pictures of his friend with Donna. At that time, I was not sure of their role. If Millie thought I was cold and distant on the way home, she didn't yet know the monster in me, and I knew she wouldn't like him. Deep down, I didn't want to lose her, but I wanted her to make the final decision. I might have confronted her when I found out that this was all planned, but then I would always wonder if she would remain faithful for the rest of our lives. Well, the rules of the game changed as soon as she asked if she could go away with them right after she confessed to her affair, and I remembered the line from the old Sherlock Holmes movie where he said, "Game on." When we got home, I made the excuse that I was going down to the basement to get a bottle of wine to drink while we discussed what had happened and whether I could forgive her. God knows, I wanted and did it, really did. But then came a phone call. Did she think I was a wimp ready to accept her affair? While I was in the basement, I voice-activated the phone and video cameras throughout the house, in case he comes by one day while I'm at work. I wanted to write down everything she said in case I needed it later, and more importantly, I needed to know the truth. I knew she wasn't telling me everything, and I saw that she was lying. It was written all over her face. I was upset when Donna called and Millie turned to me and asked if she could go away with them in a few weeks for a long weekend. I thought my life was over. She just promised that she would fix everything, and then bam! She hit me on the sly. I couldn't understand how Millie could throw away 40 years of her life so easily. In a matter of minutes, she completely destroyed me. God, how angry I was. I needed to get out of the house before I did something I would regret. Luckily, I hadn't had too much to drink and grabbed my car keys and headed out the door. On the way, I turned and said, "Millie, please don't do this. You said he didn't mean anything to you." You're an adult and responsible for your actions, and you need to remember that I love you. I don't think that I can ever forgive you if you leave with them again." Obviously, my words and my feelings meant nothing to her. She made her decision long before. Then I remembered what she said: "I don't regret this affair." How my words could change her mind, but I knew I had to give her a chance. I drove around the city for a long time, getting angrier by the minute, and eventually stopped at a bar so as not to kill myself in a car accident. I haven't been there for a long time. As I entered, I saw an old acquaintance sitting alone in a quiet booth. He was probably the most suspicious private detective in town. He took one look at my face and called me, ordering a scotch for me. I was surprised that he remembered that I was drinking. It didn't take him long to get me to tell him what happened. He asked what I was going to do, and I said I wanted the four of them to suffer for what they had done and what they were going to do to me. I had no intention of being a cuckold now or for the rest of my life. He was good at business and directed me in the direction I thought I wanted to go by asking if I knew who they were. I told him that Millie was probably worried about what I would do and refused to tell me their full names, but I had some photographs. He turned to me and whispered, "Do you just want a little pain or utter revenge?" My response was quick, and I simply said, "Extreme." I saw him smile when he asked what particular things I was thinking about. This all meant more work for him. He also hated unfaithful wives. I told him what I was thinking, and then he suggested that I go home and see him tomorrow so we could develop my ideas and discuss organizing an extreme pain for them and the cost. I knew that now I liked him for a reason. I spent little time with him because he had very dubious friends. For a certain price, they could become my friends. When I got home, Millie wasn't downstairs, so I went down to the basement and listened to her conversation with Donna, which was recorded, which confirmed my suspicions that everything had been planned. Millie told Donna that things didn't go according to plan, and I suspected she was having an affair, and she confessed. She thought I forgave her when she called and asked about the weekend, and then I became very cold again and left the house. Millie was worried that I might divorce her if they continued, but Donna quickly reassured her by telling her that we had been married for 40 years, and I would not leave her and die a lonely old man. Donna went further and suggested that Millie, on the other hand, could divorce me and rob me dry if things got difficult, and then she could marry Eric if she wanted. I could hear in Millie's voice that she didn't want this. She was there for the excitement and fun. Donna finished by saying that she knew me well enough to know that as long as Millie didn't deprive me of sex, I wouldn't complain. I was just a man. She stressed that it was important that Millie sleep with me that night to sort of get me back on track. I wondered if Millie's promise of a great night of hot sex was because she still loved me, or was it just a planned, pathetic attempt? Now they could all burn in hell because it was no longer important to me. Did she really think I would just give up and get over it? No, it's damn unlikely. I locked all the records and went upstairs. Millie was lying naked on the bed and waiting for me. God, she was beautiful. She didn't look like she was 59. In fact, she didn't even look 45. I saw she wasn't sleeping, so I asked, "What have you decided?" She replied timidly, "They have already booked the chalet, and it would be stupid to lose it." "Then, nothing will happen, I promise. Eric means nothing to me. I won't let him touch me anymore. It's just a weekend with friends for fun." I couldn't believe the nonsense she was spouting after what I'd heard in the basement, and I responded, "Millie, I was willing to forgive you for cheating on the cruise, but if you go away with them again, there's a good chance that our marriage may end." She quickly responded, "You have to learn to trust me, Ben. This will strengthen our marriage. Ben, you are the only man I love. You know it." This is complete nonsense, I thought, but I had to say it out loud. Millie must have thought she could get away with it, and I was too scared to stop her. She beckoned me towards her. I just crawled into bed and ignored her. I just lay there with my back turned to her. Millie was shocked. She should have taken the hint and started to worry. Unfortunately, she stuck to her plan. She sobbed quietly while I fell asleep. I had nightmares all night. My love for her turned into disgust, at least for this night. We used to go to church every Sunday morning. But by the time Millie woke up, I was long gone. Personally, I now didn't care whether she went to church or not. I got up early for a reason and downloaded and printed the photos from the previous day and burned them onto a DVD. I found that their names could be clearly made out. What a bonus. I downloaded several apps onto her iPhone and activated them, then hid them. I will now receive copies of all her messages sent and received. Another app told me every number she called or who called her. I initially thought about turning off her phone, but I knew that I would be losing a valuable source of information that I needed to avoid being caught off guard again. Anyway, she could have easily gone out and bought a prepaid cell phone if I had done so. My private investigator was punctual, and we walked into his office together, and as soon as we sat down, I handed him my photos and a copy of the phone record. He had programs on his PC that made me question their legitimacy because they gave him access to information that was not available on the internet. Our two heroes married late and worked together in the company of Eric's father-in-law. Eric married the boss's daughter, and both Theo and he had teenage children. We had their addresses too. I laughed when I told him that the men had told Donna and Millie that they were single and even talked about getting married. They were real fools. We learned so much about them within a couple of hours, but we needed more information to make it work. We discussed the possibility of teaching both men a lesson physically, and I thought it would be a great idea. I really liked it. He said he would let me know when this happened so I could have a good alibi with reliable witnesses who would testify that I wasn't there and wasn't involved. It was expensive, but his friends guaranteed their work. I said it should happen after Labor Day weekend. I wanted to make sure that Millie would keep her word and refuse to have sex with them. It could have saved my marriage. I still needed to deal with her friend who was helping them cuckold me. I asked him if he knew anyone who could set the building on fire for me. I was joking when I said this, so he wouldn't think it was excessive. For some reason, he looked around, as if checking to see if anyone else was in the office, then said quietly, "I have a friend who is out on bail at the moment, and he has a record of arson as long as your arm. He is a real pyromaniac, but he knows his stuff. He will appear in court next month on another arson charge. He's going to jail either way, but he may need help paying for a lawyer." I asked if he could be trusted, and he said it was his brother, and for a few extra dollars my name would never be mentioned. That was enough for me. We planned everything like a military operation. I gave him Donna's cell number and a photo I had prepared, and suggested he buy a one-time prepaid cell phone for his brother. I told him my plan that on Sunday morning, around 10 a.m. of Labor Day weekend, he would send Donna a message like, "Make sure you're free at 11 p.m. tonight. You can stop this any time before you change your mind." If she calls back, he might just say he dialed the wrong number. Then, after setting fire to Donna's work and her apartment above, he must send another message. Job done. See you for settlement on Tuesday evening, as and where agreed. We then discussed the benefits of his brother getting caught and taking the blame, or if everything went smoothly, of him contacting the insurance company for a plea deal. His brother was confident that he would be caught if he used the same method, and perhaps he could negotiate and blame Donna as the mastermind. They will have his phone number with a history of messages to her. He might even get less time on the first charge if he's lucky and behaves correctly. This solved Donna's problem. With some luck, she will spend some time in jail for her involvement, and the cost of a good lawyer will bankrupt her. In the worst-case scenario, she would be left without a job, without a home, without insurance, and without everything she had. We knew that their men lived in another city, and my private investigator said that he had a friend there who could keep an eye on them and would quickly inform us so that we could carry out another phase of my revenge plan. It costs money, of course, but isn't everything worth it? The funny thing was that I was paying for all of this with our shared savings, so that if we ended up getting divorced, she would also help pay for evidence of her cheating. I was sure we wouldn't have enough time. He called his friend, another private investigator, and sent him photos, their names, and what we already knew about them. I heard him on the phone as he downloaded the attachments and read the email. This was incredible luck, since he already knew about them. He looked after them for another unfortunate husband. They were busy, weren't they? The time frame again looked good for what I wanted to do when he told us that they meet every Tuesday night at the same bar in town and seduce any woman. They truly considered themselves God's gift to all women. Now we also had a date, Tuesday after the weekend. I didn't want to drag this out too long. I listened carefully when their contract was confirmed over the phone with professionals from out of town. Details will be sent later after I leave. I think they were working on the assumption that what I don't know can't hurt me. Or them. I wasn't sure how many more hits my bank account could take, but I told him I needed proof of their weekend at the chalet. Photos, audio, video, whatever I could get. I wanted to sue them for cheating in the divorce. He said that in order to install the surveillance equipment correctly, he would have to rent a chalet for the middle of the week to get everything installed correctly. When I agreed, he asked if I would like to go on holiday with him, but I said I couldn't bear the thought and refused. Of course it would cost more, but I knew it would be worth it when Eric Millie's second letter completely destroyed me. It's one thing to know that your wife of 40 years of marriage cheated on you, but he included several digital photos with the letter. I will definitely attach one or maybe all of these photographs to the divorce papers. I was sure their wives would appreciate them too when they were given the envelopes, probably on Thursday or Friday at the hospital. We decided to include DVDs and photos from the weekend, as well as a letter from the STD clinic notifying them that their husbands had probably given them an STD and they should go to the nearest clinic immediately. I was surprised how he was able to arrange it, but I had already learned that you can do a lot with money. Nothing changed at home. I kept asking Millie not to leave, and she kept saying that I should trust her and that this would strengthen our relationship. I had sex with her several times, but there was no pleasure in it. I missed love and tenderness. Test results for any and all STDs came back negative, for which I was grateful, but knew that after the weekend my life would be in turmoil. Finally, I heard from my private investigator. He enjoyed his little break. Of course, he would have to stay longer to capture the information transmitted from the chalet and retrieve the cameras after they left. But it would not cost any extra money because he had a duplicate key made for access. The long weekend came all too quickly and Friday morning arrived sooner than I expected. From Millie's conversations on the phone last night, I realized that she truly believed that I would be happy to take her and Donna to the airport if she asked. She followed all of Donna's directions and expected me to be enthusiastic to help. I gave Millie one last chance and asked her to change her mind and not leave. She said it was too late as she had already packed and everything was booked and paid for, so I needed to trust her, and she would fix everything when she got home on Monday night. That was the last thing I needed. When I left, she stood at the garage door, waiting for me to pick up her bags and carry them to the car. She didn't even bother to ask if I would take them. I stopped in front of her and asked again, "Please don't go, Millie. We've had too many good years for you to ruin everything. I do not want to lose you." She simply waved it off and replied, "Don't be stupid, Ben. You won't lose me. I will never leave you for someone else. I'm leaving, and that's all. There's really nothing you can do about it. It's something I need to do. This is for us. Just trust me for once in your life." How could she say that? Maybe if I had not read her letters and messages, I would have believed and trusted her. Our marriage was about to fall into a deep abyss. I shocked her when I walked past and got into my car, pressing the remote control for the gate. She screamed, "Ben, I need a ride." I was so disappointed and angry that she still intended to continue cheating on me that I blurted out, "Go to hell," and left, leaving her in tears. I returned to the dark and cold house. Millie left after all. She should have realized how angry I was, but she went anyway. Now she will pay. They will all pay. Perhaps there was still a chance. I went into the basement to listen to the phone tapes of her calling Donna and telling her what happened. Millie told her that I swore at her for the first time in our lives, and then drove away, leaving her standing. Now they needed a taxi. Millie confided in Donna that she thought the weekend might be a big mistake, and she was worried about my behavior. God, what a perceptive woman. Maybe there's still a chance. Donna reassured her, telling her that on Monday evening I would be at the airport waiting for her, and everything would be fine, that I will come to my senses when I realize how much I miss her and don't want to lose her. I couldn't believe Millie could be so naive and stupid. I really didn't want to lose her and tried to call her on her cell phone, begging her to change her mind, but the phone would ring and then go to voicemail. Deep down, I knew I was late and didn't leave a message. Late at night, I was awakened by a call and prayed that it was Millie, determined to return home. But it was my private investigator who reported that they had started their debauchery party, and he had already sent some photos and videos to my email as proof. I thanked him, knowing that I would be visiting my divorce lawyer first thing tomorrow morning. Then I started crying. On Saturday morning, I sat down at the computer to pay off and close all of our shared credit cards. I had personal cards that I used for work, so I didn't worry about them. I then transferred the remaining savings from our joint account to my personal account, which I used to hide my Christmas purchases for Millie and things like that. I knew I was leaving her with nothing. She deserved nothing more in my opinion now. She'll have to find a job like everyone else. I felt like a jerk, but she was the first to cross the line and provoked my reaction. The court will have to order me to give her the share that I owe. I could live with that, since there wouldn't be much left there anyway. I was already having a hard time looking at the pictures he sent me of what they were doing. I was afraid to think what would happen next. Luckily, I had pre-arranged an appointment with my lawyer for Saturday morning, believing the divorce would continue. I gave him the photos they sent me last night to include with the divorce papers so Millie would know how honest she was and that she knowingly lied to me. We had already spent many hours together over the previous weeks, having decided to act only in case she cheated again. The documents had already been signed and filed with the court, so all that was left was to serve them. I knew from Millie's phone conversations what flight she would be on and when it was due to land, so I passed this information on to my lawyer. I assumed that Millie would write to me with details of the arrival time on Monday, but I knew that I would not answer. It was funny for me to think about how Donna said that I, being obedient, would gladly take them. They haven't gotten around to telling me about it yet, but I will be there, but not to pick it up. I told him I want to see her face when she realizes our marriage is over because of what she did. I will be nearby, and I will definitely let her see me leave, leaving her alone. I added that I was going to change all the locks in the house, and I no longer cared where she slept. All of her belongings and personal items will be in trash bags on the porch when she returns. He already knew that my private detective would tell him when and where her lovers could be notified. We couldn't tell him, of course, but I knew it would happen in the hospital, probably on Thursday or Friday. We weren't sure. I guessed that my lawyer would also guess if it was one of his friends. Whenever that happened, we had to make sure their families and bosses were with them when it happened. I didn't expect the rest of my life to be like this, if Saturday was any indication of how I would feel. Sunday was just as bad until our widowed neighbor knocked on my door. Vicky had seen me upset through the window earlier that day and came to see if I was okay. I was honest with her, and my eyes began to water as I explained that Millie had left me to spend the weekend with two men. I begged her every day for the last 3 weeks not to go, but she insisted. I also told her that Millie said she didn't regret having an affair on the cruise. Vicky asked if I was sure, and I showed her a very revealing photo from Friday night. I'd known her long enough to know she wouldn't be offended, and I told her I was going to file for divorce when Millie got back to the airport on Monday night because she'd left with them again. Vicky put her hand on mine and told me that she liked me, and if I got lonely, we could come to some kind of agreement. She then surprised me by saying that her younger brother, a policeman, and his wife were coming over for dinner, and that she had enough food and hoped that I would join them. I had met them before at her husband's funeral a couple of years ago and got along with them. In any case, I couldn't refuse the offer of a delicious dinner. We were enjoying the vintage port I had brought when we heard a fire truck siren in the distance, and I looked out the window to see a bright orange glow to the north. I realized that I had forgotten about the fire and accidentally received the perfect alibi. It must have burned hot as it had been burning for a long time. On Monday, I couldn't resist driving past what was left. I must admit that the work was done well, and all that was left was smoldering ruins. Vicky must have been worried about me, and we spent the rest of the day just walking around the park and talking about what Millie had done on the cruise and on her weekend. She asked how I knew so much, and I told her that Millie herself told me what happened on the cruise, thinking I would like it, and then the private investigator revealed the rest of the details. We had dinner at a nice restaurant in town, and I told her I needed to take care of business, and she understood. I drove her home, and she gently kissed my cheek, trying not to scare me. Her intentions were clear. She was very lonely, and a lot of time had passed. Her left hand touched my other cheek, and she reminded me that she would be there for me. She knew from our conversation that I still loved Millie. As much as I wanted to see the pain on Millie's face when she realized how stupid and selfish she had been, I dreaded the moment when she was served with the divorce papers. But I was there. The only thing I was more afraid of was looking at all the evidence of her cheating when my private investigator returned. During the day, Millie sent a message with details of their arrival, but I did not respond. I was at the airport early and quickly established who would be serving the divorce papers. He was wearing a black suit and tie and kept looking at the arrivals board, then at his watch, and finally at the photograph in his other hand. Suddenly, I saw her and knew that she was enjoying herself. I watched her laugh with Donna as they walked out of the security area together. She looked around, looking for me. Donna promised that I would be there to welcome her with open arms. I know she saw me. Her face lit up as she thought that everything Donna had said was true, and that now everything would be even better after what she had done over the weekend. She now had the best of both worlds. She had just raised her hand to wave at me when the bailiff came up to her and spoke to her. She nodded in response and was handed the documents. It's that simple. She looked at the envelope, not understanding what she was handed, and opened it. It took her a minute to realize that her life with me was over, and she fell to the floor. Like a good husband, I stayed by her side to make sure she was okay while people crowded around her. I still wanted her to see me turn my back on her and walk away. Soon she was sitting on a chair, drinking water that a caring airport employee brought her. I watched as she flipped through the papers again to make sure they were indeed divorce papers, and then pulled out one of the many large photographs from Friday night and saw that I knew what she had been doing all weekend. She realized that she had completely broken my trust after she promised every night since returning from the cruise that no one would touch her and that I could trust her. Millie was now crying as she called me, and I saw Donna looking for me among the crowd of families waiting for their loved ones. I knew Millie could see me. She recognized me immediately and watched as I slowly shook my head, turned my back to her, and walked away. She kept calling me. It was so pathetic to hear her pleas for forgiveness and declarations of love. The part of me that still loved her wanted to curl up and die as I left the building. Turning around, I saw that she was still crying, maybe for the last time. Now I hoped that she finally understood the pain she had caused me. I will never forget the look of complete agony on her face. I'm not sure, but I felt a small sense of satisfaction before I got to the car, knowing that Donna would soon find out that all she had left was her suitcase, and she might soon be wearing an orange jumpsuit in prison. I was in the car and driving home when my cell phone started ringing. He rang until I answered, when the house was securely locked. Even the shutters were closed. By then, I was ready to hear her pathetic excuses. Of course, I heard everything you would expect from a cheating wives' guide, if such a thing existed, about how sorry she was and how she would never leave without me again. Of course, Eric and Theo meant nothing to her. It was just for the sex. She would never see them again. She did this for us to improve our relationship. God, she was so predictable, and cried, saying that she wanted to save our marriage and was ready to do anything to atone for her guilt. She said she regretted what happened this time, but she was 3 days late. I was about to hang up without saying a word, but I needed to speak up and try to make her understand what she had done. So I said, "For 3 weeks, Millie, I've been trying to tell you that if you leave, everything will change between us, and you remember, I repeatedly begged you not to leave, but you did not listen to anything I said, so now you will pay for your adultery. God may forgive you, but I never will. I forgave you the first time, and you must have mistook my love for weakness on my part, but not a second time, Millie. Now there is nothing that can be saved." I knew I was lying when I continued, "There is nothing to save. You destroyed everything we had, including our plans to spend the rest of our days together. You just wasted 40 years. What a good deal, Millie. You traded 40 wonderful years for 3 days of betrayal. Just remember, Millie, I wasn't the one who thought it was okay to lie and cheat. Millie, I know you left expecting some fun. It was so wrong. You promised me they wouldn't touch you again. Oh, before I hang up, did you know that Eric and Theo are married and have children?" Before I hung up, I heard her scream, "Oh no." My phone kept ringing, and I knew I would answer it again soon. The house was in darkness, except for the security lights coming on when the taxi pulled up to the house and Millie got out, walking to the door. Luckily for her, a taxi was waiting. She tried to use all her keys several times before realizing she was locked out. She knocked on the door and began to cry again, begging for forgiveness. I was sure that all the neighbors woke up and heard her pleas. It was so difficult, but I didn't answer. I heard Donna call for her, and she got back into the taxi. She must have thought she could stay with her. I let the phone ring for a few more minutes so they could get to the scene of yesterday's fire. I checked the travel time in the morning, then answered again. Donna was really upset and was cursing like a cobbler in the background. Millie was still crying, saying that now they had nowhere to go since Donna's apartment was completely destroyed by the fire. I wasn't sure what she expected when she asked if she and Donna could spend the night at our house. I just laughed and hung up. The taxi returned not long after, and they unloaded their bags. I had turned off the security lights by then, so they were in semi-darkness after the taxi left. That's when Millie saw trash bags full of her belongings lined up together on the street. She knocked on the door and started crying loudly again. If she thought that this was all her punishment, she was very mistaken. Vicky knew this was coming. She warned me what Millie would be like. She heard Millie crying and called to her through the fence. She already knew what Millie had done, but obviously she felt sorry for her. I wasn't sure why at the time, but I found out later. I overheard Millie explaining that she was away for the weekend with a friend, and now I was kicking her out. I couldn't believe she still couldn't tell the truth. I heard Vicky tell Millie that she and her friend could stay until Friday, but then her family would come over for the weekend. Millie and Donna thanked her and dragged their suitcases towards her house. At least now everyone could sleep, if they could, of course. Our abandoned wife visited the clinic early on Friday morning and seemed very upset when she was told she had a serious case of gonorrhea. She said she had sex with Eric and Theo, and after looking at her diary, she gave the receptionist their full names and work addresses. If all goes according to plan, they will receive their letters on Tuesday morning, on their first day of work, with the requirement to immediately get tested and begin treatment at a local STD clinic. I will never complain about the postal service again, as both Eric and Theo received letters on Tuesday, as we had hoped, and they had those letters when they were taken to the hospital that night. The hospital staff immediately realized that they needed additional treatment. Our abandoned wife was about to start her vacation using my money while taking her medications. I called work and took a week off in case Millie and Donna decided to try to break into the house. Vicky told me that Donna thought I was a vindictive bastard and blamed me for burning down her job and apartment. Vicky stood up for me and explained that I was with her all day Sunday until late at night. Millie became very quiet, realizing that there would never be forgiveness, and that her friend and former neighbor Vicky had already started flirting with me. Eric and Theo visited the clinic as soon as they could on the morning of the notification. They were panicking about how to tell their wives, and they needed to know for sure whether they were infected. By lunchtime, the letters were on their way to Millie and Donna. Somehow, letters for their wives were sent to my lawyer by mistake. It's amazing what you can do for little money. I knew the letters were coming, so on Tuesday morning, I suggested to Vicky that Millie and Donna's mail be redirected to her house for the week, as I wanted nothing to do with them. I knew the police would soon find out where Donna was when our arsonist complained that she had broken their agreement. Wednesday turned out to be a very bad day for Millie and Donna. Vicky told me they were shocked and both cried when they received letters demanding they go to an STD clinic and get tested for gonorrhea. Since they both didn't have cars, Vicky offered to give them a ride, but she needed gas along the way and Millie wanted to pay to thank her for her hospitality. I followed at a reasonable distance and saw Millie return to the car crying, and then Donna came out and paid. Vicky was a great source of information and later told me that Millie was shocked to realize that I had completely cut her off from money and credit cards and that she now had to rely on others for everything. She was still in denial and kept telling Vicky that she was sure I would take her back soon and that she would find a way to repay the favor. Maybe she really knew me too well. I waited far enough to get some great photos of Millie entering the STD clinic. I had even better photos of her coming out again, crying. I was feeling much better Thursday when I received a call from my private investigator who said his brother had spoken with an insurance company investigator at the scene of the fire on Wednesday. He gave him his cell phone number and said that if the company could come to an agreement, he would testify and tell him who hired him to start the arson. He complained that he had not been paid as promised, and now they refused to even acknowledge him. The company was more than happy to negotiate a deal with the DAW if they could get a conviction and not have to pay insurance. In the end, his brother pleaded guilty to both arson charges and received half the sentence he thought he would receive for the first fire alone. The bonus for him was that his attorney fees were paid by the insurance company, and he still had the fee I gave him left over. He showed the police the text messages on his phone, and they arranged for him to come in for an identification parade once they found Donna and verified that she had received the messages. They already had his signed statement. He expected this to happen today thanks to the redirected postal service. He asked me if I had read the morning newspaper. I asked why, and he told me a sad story I'd read on the front page about two businessmen, good friends from a nearby town, who were returning home from work late one night when they were attacked, brutally beaten, then robbed late Tuesday night. It was a very brutal and cowardly attack, and both men were now in hospital and expected to remain there for a long time. We discussed how sad it is that in modern society it is no longer possible to walk safely at night. Once that was done, I ran and bought a newspaper, then called Vicky and asked to meet as soon as possible. I handed her the newspaper and talked briefly about karma, then asked her to leave it where Donna and Millie could find it. I told her that these two men were her boyfriends. She asked if I was involved, and I reminded her that she had coffee with me on Tuesday evening when it was supposed to happen. In any case, it was a different city. I wasn't sure if she believed I was somehow not involved. Late on Thursday, my private investigator called me again, saying that his friend, a private investigator, told him that the hospital was in complete chaos. Eric and Theo both received summonses for their roles in adultery with my wife. The papers stated that they were being sued, and at that very moment he handed each wife a manila envelope. We weren't surprised to hear that Eric and Theo were in the same room. It just made things easier for us. His informant informed him that Eric's father-in-law was also there and had just told them that their jobs were secure and would be waiting for them when they were ready to work, and that the company's health insurance would cover all expenses. The papers were signed and sent. When the envelopes were opened, at first there was silence as shock set in, but then there was a lot of screaming and yelling from the wives. The photographs were bad enough, but infecting them with gonorrhea, which they picked up from some tramp, was too much. They were still employed when they were hospitalized, so health insurance would have covered the costs. Eric's father invoked a moral clause in their contracts and fired them both before leaving with his daughter. By mid-afternoon, both were again summoned to their hospital beds, this time for divorce. Now they were really screwed, especially Eric. He signed the prenuptial agreement and was left with nothing but compensation, and I was behind it. I laughed when Vicky later told me that Millie took the newspaper and started screaming. She and Donna came running, scared that something terrible had happened. It turned out that she was so upset that she couldn't talk, but she showed them a newspaper article about two married businessmen. There were before photos of them, so there was no doubt. Then Millie and Donna looked at each other and then out the window at me as I mowed the lawn. Donna turned to Millie and asked, "Couldn't Ben be responsible for this? He looked really angry Monday night when you were served with the summons and my job and apartment burned down, and now this?" Vicky said she came to my defense and told them it was all a coincidence since I was with her when it happened. Millie said nothing, and tears came to her eyes as she began to fear that she had caused all this. Little did she know there was more to come. A police car driving slowly down the street caught my attention, so I stopped the mower. The car stopped outside Vicky's house, and 2 policemen and 1 policewoman got out and walked to the door. I heard Donna scream and Millie cry again. I watched with great pleasure as Donna was handcuffed, placed in the back of a police car, and driven away. I knew that she would be identified in a police identification parade and that she would not return home that night, and I wondered if she would be able to make bail. She was beginning to pay for her role in my suffering. I knew I would be there when she was sentenced. Just when Millie thought her life couldn't get any worse, Vicky reminded her that she would have guests soon and would need to move out the next morning. An hour passed before she could make the call without bursting into tears again. At least Vicky offered to let her keep all her stuff in her garage until she found somewhere to live. Millie now only has her friends from church. Well, for now, she no longer had a family. On Friday morning, Vicky took Millie and several bags of clothes she needed to a friend's house from church. Vicky and I didn't see Millie until Donna's trial 2 months later. We heard that Donna couldn't make bail and was in custody the whole time, and were surprised to see Millie in court to see her good friend sent to prison. It took us a few minutes to realize it was her, as she had changed a lot during that time. She sat there in an old, ill-fitting dress and looked unkempt and terrible. She had lost a lot of weight, her hair was a mess, and her gray roots were clearly visible. Vicky knew I felt guilty for being a real bastard by pinning a photo on the church notice board of Millie leaving the STD clinic and another of her having sex with Eric and Theo, with the caption, "Can you trust this woman next to your husband?" She learned nothing. She just needed to stop pissing off all her friends and telling everyone that I was to blame for our divorce. I only did this to stop the abusive calls from her friends just because I kicked her out for going to a bachelorette party. The calls stopped on Sunday, and I lost track of Millie when her friends at church did the typical and very unchristian thing and refused to forgive her. I handed Vicky $500. That's all I had at that moment, and she took them and took them to Millie, saying that they were from me. Vicky spoke quietly to her for a few minutes until the judge entered the courtroom and then returned to me. Millie didn't see us sitting behind her as we had come after her, and she watched Vicky walk back to her seat next to me and saw me looking at her. I nodded, and she lowered her head in shame. I knew she had finally learned her lesson and thought I had moved on. The arsonist was the most reliable witness and convinced the jury. He played his role well and received only a short sentence thanks to a plea deal when he was tried before. Donna's defense had no answer to his compelling testimony, and she was found guilty. I saw Donna look at Millie as the judge read the verdict, and then she saw me, and I smiled and nodded my head, saying a silent, "Yes." Donna burst into tears, realizing that what was happening to her was my revenge for the destruction of my marriage. She began screaming that she was innocent and that she had been framed, and was soon led out of the courtroom. She was lucky and only got 5 years. 2 months later, my divorce was finalized, and I truly believed that Millie thought I was bluffing and was confident until the last moment that I would take her back. The court ordered me to pay Millie half of our savings at the time we filed the divorce papers, which was fine with me since most of our savings were spent on revenge. I even prepared money in an envelope to give to her through my lawyer before leaving court. The house was mine before I met and married Millie, so I still have it. Eric and Theo were still in rehab, but agreed to an out-of-court settlement with me to avoid further costs and possible injury. They didn't know who beat them and didn't want to take any risks. Either way, they won't be hunting women anymore. We may have done a public service by getting rid of 2 predators. By then, Vicky and I were seeing each other every night, and neither of us was lonely. Our nights were full of affection and love. She practically moved in with me. Her family quickly accepted me as a new partner, and we acted like young lovers at times. Vicky was willing to accept that deep down I still loved Millie, but she knew that this feeling was fading every day. I knew that she also missed her husband and still loved him, so we were willing to put up with it. We had each other and didn't feel lonely. Vicky ran every morning and woke me up to see if I wanted to join her. I tried it once and told her she was trying to kill me. After that, I gave up running, but I always prepared breakfast for her return. One morning, about 3 months after my divorce, she didn't return from her run. I waited and waited while our breakfast cooled when I heard several sirens break the silence and stop about a mile away. Of course, this could not be true, but I knew that something was terribly wrong, since she was never late, and in the mornings you could set your watch by her. I rushed to the car and drove like crazy to look for ambulances, knowing deep down that it could lead me to Vicky. A policeman stopped me. I saw an accident at the intersection ahead. Firefighters and paramedics worked near a large van overturned on the sidewalk. I left my car there and handed the policeman the keys as I ran past him. I think he knew why I was running because he bit his lip and lowered his head. I pushed my way through the crowd of onlookers who had gathered to see what had happened, and suddenly I saw Vicky lying on the ground in front of me. She was hit by a van and thrown, and when it overturned, she was pinned underneath it. The other car was on the other side of the road. I saw blood everywhere and knew she was bleeding heavily. I heard them say that they were waiting for a mobile crane to lift the van. I looked at one of the medics who was working on her. She called my name when she saw me there. He just bit his lip and slowly shook his head. I sank to the ground next to her, and, as I lowered myself to be close, I placed my hand under her head. I held her and said, "I love you, and I'm going to make you an honest woman. Will you marry me, Vicky?" She must have known that she was dying, and with great difficulty she said, "Ben, that would be bigamy, because my husband is waiting for me. I will be with him again soon." I cried as she whispered to me, "Please forgive me. I've been so selfish all these months, keeping you all to myself. I have to go. You have to promise that you'll find Millie and take care of her for me. She really loved you. Most of all, and still loves. She has no one, and I secretly met with her every week in the city and gave her money, and she admitted to me that she finally realized that she was stupid by listening to Donna. She was sincere. She regrets what she did and was sure it would strengthen your marriage. In the end, she realized how much you suffered and was full of remorse." I replied, "Vicky, there is nothing to forgive. You have my promise. I love you." Then she smiled slightly and closed her eyes, and when I kissed her lips, she stopped breathing. I wasn't in her will, but that was fine, and even though we were already living as common-law spouses, I didn't challenge it. We never changed our wills. Either way, she was now with the man she truly loved. Her family was kind to me and included me in the celebration of her life. Through her family, I learned why she felt this way about Millie. She did something similar to her husband many years ago, but they overcame all the pain and resentment. Strangely for them, it made their marriage stronger after all the anger went away. I took a leave of absence for family reasons and did not leave the house for several days. I really missed Vicky and her laugh and got sentimental when I thought about her last seconds and what she said to me. I felt a big emptiness in my heart and thought about Millie and how much I missed her and how much I missed Vicky. I'm not sure why or how, but I found myself driving in the city and stopped at a traffic light. Something made me look to the left, and I saw an old woman walking down the street. Her walk seemed so familiar, and then I realized it was Millie. She had lost a lot of weight, her arms were covered with bruises, and her eyes were black. The sleeve of her old dress was torn, and people avoided her. The traffic light changed, and the car behind me honked its horn, so I drove on, but turned left onto the next street and waited for her. I watched her approach, and she kept looking around as if she was afraid she was being followed. I got out of the car and realized she didn't see me and pretended to bump into her on the corner, but then caught her to stop her from falling as she was very weak. When she fell, she looked up and saw me and burst into tears. I saw that the sparkle in her eyes had disappeared. She was dirty and unkempt, and I doubted she had been at the women's shelter where she was supposed to be for several days. I helped her get up and led her to the car. She resisted at first, but was too weak to stop me from putting her in the passenger seat. Then I walked around the car and sat down in my seat. I turned and saw her looking at me. Neither of us said anything for a few minutes. Then I said, "Did you know Vicky died?" She replied, "No." Then she burst into tears again. I suggested hot chocolate, knowing it was her favorite drink. She refused to go to the cafe with me. I think she was too ashamed. She really smelled bad. I went in alone and ordered hot chocolate in takeout cups and toasted ham, cheese, and tomato sandwiches and hot fries. She loved them too. I planned to go somewhere quiet and eat with her, but when we arrived, she had already eaten everything. She was hungry. When she finished eating, she sat quietly for a few minutes. Then I asked what happened to her. She lowered her head and said, "I'm so sorry that I told everyone those lies about you. I tricked them into calling you, hoping you'd feel guilty and take me back, but it backfired on me. I never thought that you would do this to me. I didn't think that what I did would hurt you so much. Even though I still love you, I know that we are finished now and I deserve everything you have. I did by attaching those photos in the church. I'm so sorry. I ruined your love and trust for me, didn't I? I was so selfish and only thought about my pleasure and convinced myself that this would revive our relationship even after your warning." I was silent. This was the remorse I wanted after the cruise. She didn't say anything for a few minutes, just looked at me, then continued. "Vicky was my only friend for a long time. I wondered why she hadn't come to see me in recent weeks and thought I'd lost her too. She helped me with money every week and gave everything I could. I never thought that you would be so deeply hurt by what I did. I didn't understand until she told me. I thought that you just wanted to get back at me for what I did by divorcing me. She even said how I changed you and how difficult it was to live with you now. I was sad when she said she was with you now, but to some extent I was happy that you have good company and are not alone without me. I often walked past our house in the evenings to see you again. Almost every time I saw you both laughing and talking while hugging, just like we used to do. It should have been me with you. I still can't believe I really hurt you that much. I loved you more than anything in the world, and I hurt you so much. Then I hurt you again and didn't realize it. No wonder you divorced me. When all my friends found out the truth about what I did, they refused to have anything to do with me. Even they told me that I was so selfish and stupid for doing what I did. It took me a while to realize that you were trying to stop me. Ben, I'm so sorry for everything I've done." She began to talk about how terrible her life had become, how she had been robbed repeatedly, and how her divorce money had been stolen. She was kicked out of the shelter because she fought, and she didn't sleep for days because she was afraid she was being followed. We just sat there in silence for a while. I was lost in my thoughts. She must have felt safe with me, and she fell into a deep sleep. I knew there was a part of me that still loved her, and I took her home. I let her soak in the bath while I prepared dinner for us. She soon came downstairs, slowly, looking for me. She was wet and naked. I looked at her for a moment, then she said quietly, "I just wanted to make sure you were still here." She then turned and went back to dry herself and her hair. Vicky's clothes were still too big for her, but they were the best I could offer at that moment. She clearly couldn't wear her old clothes that I had packed for her weekend. I brought home what was left in Vicky's garage. We finished eating and had to hurry as we had a meeting. She reluctantly walked into the doctor's office with me. Then I realized that he went to the same church as her and could see pictures of her. While he was feeling and examining and taking blood samples for tests, he asked if we were back together, and I just shrugged. I honestly didn't know. Deep down, I probably knew, so he didn't say anything. He didn't tell us anything we didn't know, and then said the STD test results would be back in a week. Millie looked stunned and turned to me, complaining, "But Ben, I told you no one." I interrupted her and said, "Millie, it's a matter of trust." She knew she had destroyed my trust in her and lowered her head. Plus, I didn't know if she was taking her medications correctly when she was being treated for gonorrhea, but I didn't say that. Then I added, I'll take the test too, because I was with Vicky. I saw tears, but she didn't say anything. Millie fell silent again, slowly realizing what I had said. I think she hoped that I would take her back unconditionally. She now realized that she had a long way to go and remembered what Vicky had told her about my demons that she had released and how I had changed. We went to her old hairdresser. Fortunately, they were able to find time for her, and they worked wonders on her hair and removed the gray hair. She began to look more like the old Millie. We then went to the mall to buy clothes. She only had Vicky's clothes left in my closet, and they didn't fit her. We didn't buy much as I was hoping Millie would gain weight once she started eating healthy again. Back home, we sat watching TV, and I went down to the basement to get a bottle of wine to drink while we waited for dinner to cook. I turned on my phone and security cameras and chose a good red wine. I really wanted to trust her again, but I knew it would be a long road. I was seriously injured. We were sitting on the couch watching a DVD together, and she snuggled up to me and I could hear her quietly crying. I didn't want her to suffer again. My revenge was complete. I wanted her to stay, but I didn't know how to approach it. Perhaps we needed to meet again, like we did a long time ago. Then I had another idea, and after a while I said, Millie, I need a housekeeper. I can't afford much after our divorce. I heard a sob when I said the word divorce, then continued, can we try to make things work again and see what happens, okay? She was silent for a while, then finally answered, where will I sleep? I didn't think about it in advance, so I decided to answer the question with a question. Where do you want to sleep? She must have already made up her mind, and answered hopefully, with you, if you please, Ben. My demons were still at large, and I had concerns about STDs, and I responded, how about a guest room until the test results come back for both of us? And if they come back clear, can you sleep with me again? She was just beginning to realize how much I had changed, as Vicky said. She wondered if she could ever win back my trust, or maybe it was like our marriage, a thing from the past. The first few weeks were very quiet as we began the long journey of regaining what we had lost. Millie got up very early every day and made me breakfast before I left for work. She was still weak, but she seemed to grow stronger every day as she cleaned and polished everything in the house she knew so well. After the divorce, she took nothing. She was happy. She came back to our house and could snuggle with me while we watched TV. I knew it was important to her. Best of all, she was eating healthy again. When I got home each day, I would stop and say hi, hug her for a moment, then go down to the basement like I had done in those few weeks leading up to that weekend. I was obsessed and had to check her out. At that moment, I could not do otherwise. We went back to the doctor for the test results, and I saw Millie's eyes light up when they told us we were clear. Millie couldn't wait to get back into our bed and move the few clothes she had that fit from Vicky's back into her old closet. At first, she used one of Vicky's nightgowns, but I was still sleeping naked, and I realized that I couldn't make love to her, so I didn't do it. But every morning I woke up to find her naked too, pressed against me, and her hand was on me. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. Her scent was in my pillows again, and she seemed so pleasant, a little bony, but that was enough. I soon realized that she did not leave the house alone, even during the day. She said that she was too ashamed because everyone knew what she had done, and many of her friends had seen that photo. I was too thorough in my pursuit of retribution. Did I regret what I did? Maybe, but I knew at the time that I did what I had to do to destroy them. I couldn't let them win. Moreover, I compensated for what Shylock was deprived of. We were sitting together watching TV one evening about a month after she returned home, and I realized that I had never lost my love for her. She has always been with me. I hugged her lovingly for the first time in what seemed like an eternity and pulled her close to me, and she hugged me tightly. I heard her cry quietly, knowing that I had overcome another one of my obstacles. I told her that I really missed her and our old life while she was gone. I then added that I wondered if it was over now and accepted that it might never be the same after what happened. She cried louder now and admitted that ever since it happened, she had been hoping and praying that we would get back together and that she had never stopped loving me. I explained that we were both different now after what she had done, and if we had any hope of a meaningful reconciliation, perhaps we should consider going to marriage counseling. Perhaps I shouldn't have said marriage, because she lifted her face to kiss me on the lips. I just shook my head and turned away. I knew I was in trouble. Perhaps I needed help more than she did. I didn't think I would suffer so much, and I was really worried, so I pulled myself out of her arms and told her that I was tired and was going to bed. The bedroom light was off, and I was lying in bed trying to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her cheating on me over and over again. I don't know when I fell asleep, but another nightmare befell me. I felt bad for waking her up. I told her about it. She said it was already 2 a.m., and that she was awake, and that I had been screaming at her all night in her sleep, and she heard me and what I was saying. My head was full of mixed emotions. I got out of bed and went to the guest room and fell on the bed. This morning I woke up hugging Millie. I had to stop and think about why we were in the guest room, and then I remembered what happened last night. I disentangled myself from the hug and soon got into the shower. While I was showering, I reflected on the night before and knew that I needed help to deal with my problems. My suggestion of attending counseling must be implemented if we are to have a future. I kissed Vicky with pleasure. I couldn't do the same to Millie after her betrayal. I couldn't understand why I felt this way. I didn't tell Millie that I was going to counseling twice a week, and she never asked why I was coming home later than usual. It soon got to the point where the consultant demanded Millie's presence at the sessions, and we both took turns talking about what had happened. Of course, I could not tell everything about the arson or beating, but I enjoyed telling the consultant how much I enjoyed the pain that others experienced. If Millie was shocked that I took her betrayal so badly, she was completely stunned by the degree of hatred I felt towards everyone involved in my misfortune. I was frank and told him in front of Millie that I had recorded all her phone calls and knew in advance about all her deceptions. I told her how I hoped our love for each other would make her realize what she was missing and not move away with them, but I came home to an empty house. It was hard for me to describe my horror when I saw all the pictures and watched the DVD of the woman I loved acting in ways I had never seen her before, letting them do things she said we couldn't do, and how I still see visions of what she did. Finally, I looked at Millie and saw her in tears, and she said with difficulty, "Did you see everything I did?" I replied, "Absolutely everything, Millie. There were cameras in every room in the chalet." Millie then replied, "Even when you were handed the documents, I hoped they were only the photographs you saw. Then, I prayed you would never find out what I did, and thought you only had those few photos I've seen, but you have a lot worse, don't you?" I was afraid to try to say anything for fear of breaking down, so I just nodded. The counselor looked up and asked, "You still seem so bitter about everything that happened, Ben. Why did you invite her back into your life? You still seem so unapologetic at times." I answered in the only way I could. Her infidelity cost me my wife. How should I feel about it? Part of me never stopped loving her. The other three paid a huge price for what they did, but what they paid was not enough. Really, but so did Millie. We all suffered, even I suffered in different ways. We lost our marriage, all her friends, and on top of that, she ended up in a living hell for who knows how many months. I want to learn to trust her again and love her completely. Get to know the new Millie until I'm sure she'll never do something like that again. Maybe one day, who knows what will happen if we're lucky. He continued, "But if you still loved her, why did you divorce Millie and make her suffer? Did you have anything to do with what happened to the other three?" I wondered where this person was coming from and stood up saying, "I divorced her because she betrayed me. She betrayed my trust and my love and hurt me like no one had ever hurt. I tried to warn her, and she left me no choice. Anyway, how else could she understand how much I loved her if I did nothing and let them get away with what they did?" I thought. If she honestly believed that something, what is she doing right? How will she ever accept that it was wrong? "I'm done for today, doctor. Are you happy now? I'll be in the car waiting for you to finish, Millie. We'll be back next week as scheduled." "Oh, you asked if I was responsible for what happened to the other three. Well, Let's just say by their actions they were responsible for what happened to them. Maybe I knew that this would happen to them and could have stopped it, but chose not to because I wanted them all to suffer, to feel the same pain as me or worse. Millie just sat there with her mouth open, realizing that I had destroyed the other three because of the pain I was in. I walked out with my demons that he had just fed. He spent the next hour just with Millie while I waited in the parking lot. I knew they could see me from their window. When she came out, she said she wanted to see me before I left, so out of curiosity, I went back alone to see what he wanted while Millie sat in the car. He apologized for his words. He told me that he already knew what I would say in our previous sessions, but wanted Millie to hear it firsthand to give her an idea of what she had caused and how much her actions had affected me so that he could begin to help to her. We met with him every week for several months and discussed many issues, but I still could not kiss her, remembering what she was doing. We started taking long weekend trips to places where no one knew us to make her more comfortable and to get her out of the house. We always stopped at restaurants that were far from home. As the days got shorter, we started staying in hotels overnight, and we always had great sex when we did. Millie gained weight and began to look like the old Millie, except she's a lot older now, but at least some of the shine is back. My anger slowly disappeared with each passing day, and we began to hug and touch each other like we had for a long time. Those touches and hugs meant a lot to both of us. One night, after we made love, I kissed her tenderly on the cheek, and then, without thinking, I kissed her on the lips, and she hugged me. She immediately understood the significance of this, and began to sob quietly as we simply hugged and lay entwined in each other's arms. One Sunday, the doorbell rang. I opened the door as our only visitors now were Mormons or Seventh-day Adventists trying to save our souls. I was always polite and talked to them for a few minutes. They believed in what they were doing and did not harm anyone. Imagine my surprise when I opened the door and saw friends from the past before our divorce. We met them through Millie's church and hit it off immediately. I haven't seen them since I locked her up. I probably could have kept the friendship, but I didn't, so I couldn't complain that they didn't come to see me either. I invited them in, and we all stood there trying to think of what to say for a few minutes before I invited them to sit in the living room while Millie and I made coffee. I heard them whispering. She felt uncomfortable and wanted to leave. He wanted to restore our friendship. We sat down and started talking about the old times we had together. Then they finally admitted that they had heard from church friends that we were living together again and decided to stop by and see how we were. I noticed his wife was nervous. Then she finally asked directly if we were getting married again. Millie looked down and I simply said no. Perhaps it was a little pushy on their part, but they asked if we had such plans. I surprised Millie by saying, I thought about it, but didn't know if she'd want to, considering I still have a few hurdles to overcome. Millie's eyes opened wide, and she burst into a smile, jumping on my neck and bursting into tears. The three of us took it as a yes, and our friends understood the significance of the moment and joined us in a small celebration. We talked for a long time, had a few drinks, and found out that they wanted to see us when all the problems started, but did not know how to remain friends with both sides. So typical in these situations, that's why they didn't see either of us. Since their visit happened to be the reason for the proposal, I asked him to be my best man, and she would be Millie's maid of honor. We called the priest at our old church, who was delighted to hear from us, and arranged a suitable date for a quiet wedding. We were stunned when the entire congregation showed up unexpectedly on our wedding day. Luckily, they all brought food with them to help celebrate our second chance at love. It was a great day, so I didn't say anything about the hypocrisy of those who joined us. Counseling continued for both of us, and we finally started going out to local restaurants and clubs after Millie accepted the fact that people would never forget what happened. Somehow, we always ended up with people who knew us before the divorce. I saw them whispering quietly and looking at us, probably wondering why we were getting back together after everything she had done. If they had asked me, I would have told them what I finally understood. Donna was right when she said I would be lost without Millie after 40 years of marriage. Who wouldn't? What she didn't take into account was my desire for revenge, driven by my anger and the demons they unleashed. Poor Vicky had no choice when she lost her husband. He died unexpectedly before her, and she could very easily have lived the rest of her life as a single woman. She lived alone until, fortunately for her, Millie made her mistake. I didn't think I could ever replace any of the women I had in my life. I loved both. I had a choice, and I didn't want to be alone at my age, as if anyone would be interested in me at all. Old Millie paid the full price for her mistakes and stupidity, and she was gone forever. I got to know the new Millie, and when I felt I knew her well enough, I wanted her to be a part of my life again and married her. She became much more attentive and tried to please me in any way. Of course, I still had my issues, but they seemed to be slowly disappearing as my demons that my first wife had released were slowly locked away again. Counseling has helped both of us tremendously. Millie learned to live without some of the pleasures she used to take for granted when we made love. I know that I am now so close to breaking the final barrier. Maybe, as Christmas approaches, I'll make a huge effort and make love to my new wife completely, as I should. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.